I recently made a video reviewing the first part of Hasbro's Fantastic Four Retro Wave in the Marvel Legends line. Today I'm going to be taking a look at some of the special releases that are supporting this wave. One of them is the Doctor Doom, which was actually released in 2020 and at the time was standalone. But shortly after the announcement of the Fantastic Four wave, we also got word that there are going to be two extra special releases, and these were going to be variants of the Invisible Woman and the Human Torch. So I put my order in, and the expected arrival date was sometime in March next year. So I was really surprised to get a notification to say that they'd shipped early, and here they are. So I thought it'd be fun to have a roundup of all three of these special releases and see how they compare. The first thing to talk about is the packaging, because you'll notice with these special releases they come in these oversized white boxes with the Fantastic Four logo and the character nicely drawn up front and centre. And this is, as I said, these are oversized packages, so these are quite large boxes that the figures come in, and they look really quite nice, I have to say. Despite not being coloured in and being purely black and white, there's something very interesting and yeah, quite displayable about these. So I'm quite fond of this packaging. I think it works really very nicely. And when we open the boxes up, we can see the standard clamshell packaging within, which of course is very retro. It's based on the 90s Toy Biz releases that in turn were also tied into the animated series. As I said in the previous video, this gives me a real kick. I have great affection for this retro packaging. I really love those figures, collecting them as a child, so this definitely hits the right nostalgia vein for me. And I just think they're really colourful, they're really bright and interesting, and I just love the design of them. As I said in the last video though, the only criticism I have is that where the Fantastic Four logo is, on the original releases from Toy Biz way back in the 90s, this was actually holographic, and I really liked that. It really caught the light and it looked really really stylish and quite fun. Sadly, they haven't replicated that here. It is just a matte silver, which is a real shame because that would have been so cool. And once again, on the reverse of the packaging, we have the Fantastic Four logo, we have the character design there up front and centre, which is really cool, this time coloured in of course, and it just looks really bright and colourful. There's a bit of information about the characters, and for the Invisible Woman and Human Torch, we also see the other figures that are released in the standard wave. So to kick us off, I'm going to start by looking at the Invisible Woman. This variant of course is a clear translucent plastic to create the effect of her being fully invisible, whereas the standard release of course just has her in her blue and white costume. I think this is definitely a really fun idea. It's really the only way to get across the idea of her being invisible, and we've seen this before in various different Invisible Woman figures across the years. But I don't think we've ever had a wholly translucent one from the Marvel Legends line. Now, in terms of the head sculpt, I haven't seen the standard release, i.e. the painted release, up close in hand yet, so it's difficult for me to judge. From some of the production photos I saw, I was a little bit uncertain about this head sculpt. Here, though, it's really difficult to make out. It looks absolutely fine in hand when invisible. I don't have a problem with it here. This looks pretty good. It's, like I said, it's pretty difficult to make out for sure, but it looks fairly decent here. But one thing I'm really not impressed with is this number that's been stamped into the plastic. So we can see there's a number 2 here and there's some other scratching around it. This is really not great. Now, I don't know whether this is just mine, but I'm assuming it's across the board. And to have it right here in the midriff and the navel is really visually off-putting. And yeah, maybe it's been on the back, it would have been more appropriate, maybe even on the leg and the inside thigh maybe. But to have it right here front and centre is really irritating. But that said, the translucent effect works really, really well. When we shine a light behind it, we can see how the figure just really glows and lights up. And certainly you can see some of the joints and some of the interior workings, but it's really not that noticeable. It's not that off-putting, for me at least. And I think it actually works really quite well. It's quite striking. So I think they've done a pretty decent job with this. Now, one thing I'm always very cautious about with translucent figures is the articulation, because in my experience, for some reason, they tend to be a lot more brittle, a lot more prone to snapping than their standard release counterparts. So I have to be very careful with this. Now, here I can say that when I'm trying to spin the head from side to side, although she has the ball jointed neck, you can see there's definitely resistance from the hair there. Like, it's a hard piece of plastic, and it doesn't really allow for much movement, and it definitely get a lot of pushback on that. She does have the ball jointed shoulders, which work really well. She's got the single jointed elbow there and there's no issues, and of course she has the pin swivel at the wrist there that allows the hand to rotate all the way around and arc in and out. She also has that upper ab articulation that allows her to move from side to side and lean from side to side, and there's a little bit of wiggle room to move forwards and backwards as well. Now, she also has ball jointed hips, she has a swivel at the upper thigh, and she can kick her legs out to the side, a fair bit, but not all the way, and I'm not too keen to push it, like I said, because of the translucent plastic. I don't want it to snap. But she can also kick her legs forwards and back, and of course she's got double jointed knees, and she also has the ankle pivot there as well, so obviously her foot can arc from side to side and up and down. She also comes with a couple of accessories. She has her force field, which is kind of like an invisible shield, and she also has an extra pair of closed fists as well. And there's a little gap in the force field to allow her hand to slide in and hold it up, and it looks pretty cool, to be fair. I think this works quite well. So all in all then, I think this is a pretty decent figure. I think for me it's going to be a 3. I'm quite irritated by the number that's been stamped into her navel there. That's really distracting and quite irritating. Also, I'm not overly keen on the articulation in the head. The hard plastic of the hair there, preventing that articulation is a little bit frustrating as well. So that definitely drops it down a couple of points. Moving on to the Human Torch, you'll notice the key difference with this variant, of course, is that this is Johnny in his blue and white costume, as opposed to his on flame effect. Now, I may be mistaken. I think this is a recycled head sculpt from the previous Dan Slott inspired version of the character that was released a couple of years ago. But I do think the colouring is different here. And for me, I actually think this works really, really very well. I actually really like this head sculpt, and it definitely seems to have captured the essence of the character. The colouring is really nice and bright. And yeah, I think this works very nicely. I really like that we have a non-flame effect Human Torch, although I obviously want both. I do think this is quite cool. It's nice to have Johnny when he's not on fire, and I think they've used the same base paint that we saw on the Reed Richards as a standard release, which I think is a nice colour scheme. It's one that they used obviously in the animated series, is what they had in their 90s outfits. I think from memory they are slightly too darker blue to be accurate, certainly for the animated series. I do feel they were a much lighter shade of blue, but that's a minor gripe. I do really like this colour combination of the blue and the white, and yeah, I think this looks pretty solid. You'll notice on his hands here that he also has some flame effects on them. Now, these are swappable because there are, spoilers, interchangeable hands, so you can have them with or without the flame effects. Now, pleasingly and quite surprisingly, Johnny scores really highly on the articulation. He has the ball-jointed head. As you can see, there's no hindrance here to him moving his head right the way around and up and down, which is fantastic. But he also has this extra articulation here in the chest, which is that sort of butterfly joint, which is fantastic. So he can really arc his arms right the way back if you want him to, or lean them forward, which is great. He's got the ball-jointed shoulder, he's got the bicep swivel, he's got the double-jointed elbows, and of course, he's got the pin swivel at the wrist as well, which is fantastic. As if that wasn't enough though, he also has an ab crunch, so he can lean forwards and backwards, and he's also complemented with a swivel at the waist there, so tons of opportunities for dynamic poses with this character, virtually limitless. He's also got the ball-jointed hips, of course, the legs kick out, he's got the upper thigh swivel there as well, the legs kick forwards, they kick backwards, double-jointed knees, and then he's also got a boot-cut swivel at the top of the calf there, and then he has the pivot at the ankle as well, so yeah, there's not much more you could ask for in terms of articulation. He also comes with a handful of accessories as well, including a pair of closed fists with non-flames. He also has a flame effect that he can attach to his back, and some extra flame effects to go around the arms. Now, I have to be honest, Johnny is actually probably my least favourite member of the Fantastic Four, which is a character I've never really connected with, to be honest. However, he's blown me out the water in this incarnation. This is absolutely fantastic. I love this figure to bits. I just think it ticks all the boxes and it wins on every front. So for me, this is a 5-star figure because there isn't much more I could ask from it. There really isn't anything to complain about or nitpick. It's pretty much perfect. And so, this then brings me to Doctor Doom. And across the years in the Marvel Legends line, we've had no shortage of Doctor Doom figures, endless variants with varying degrees of success. But I have to say, for me, I feel like this figure is trying to take the best of all of those incarnations and put them into one. So, starting with the head sculpt, I'm pretty confident that this is just a re-release of the previous, most recent releases of Doctor Doom. It's a pretty good sculpt. You can see lots of rivets in the face there, and of course we've got the detail of the eyes. There's not a lot of paint apps going on in the face. It would have been nice to have a bit of a wash to make it look a little bit more authentic, I suppose. But I do think this is a really great sculpt. It looks really, really good, and I really like that the head, the hood of the head is actually a separate piece from the cape, so it allows for articulation, which we'll look at a little bit later. But overall, this looks really nice. Now, one of the key things to note with this figure that makes it really different and stand out, first of all, he's got the nice gold chains at the top of his cloak there, which looks really striking, very nice. But Crucially, he has a little bit of actual material for a collar, and this is a soft cotton, and it looks really good. The contrast between this deep green with the slightly lighter green of the cloak and then the bright green of the tunic works incredibly well. I'm a huge fan of this, and it just adds so many textures and dimensions to the character in terms of the tone of the colours, and it just looks visually really attractive and really interesting. And I think also having a Doctor Doom finally with a more vibrant, lighter green is fantastic. He's usually presented in much darker colours, so this is really nice to see. And then we have that detailing and the paint apps on the belt, again a lighter brown with the gold there. It just looks fantastic, and the overall sculpt of the arms and the gauntlets all looks great. As I mentioned, the head obviously is separate from the cape, so it does allow that articulation. See, there's that gap there to allow the head to bend forwards and backwards, which is crucial, and I think this works really well. The cape is a fairly hard but quite malleable plastic, which is good, and I'm really pleased to say he has his gun holster, and it's nice to see the D for Doom on that there as well, which is fantastic. And of course, you can unbutton his holster to reveal his Luger inside, which is pretty cool. And again, the sculpt for the legs and the feet is really cool. That armour effect with the straps and the various circular discs and things like that looks pretty cool. I think it's a really nice sculpt. If I was going to have a minor criticism, be that maybe it would have been nice to have a bit more of a paint wash running through this to make it look a bit more weathered. And likewise in the cape as well, just a little paint wash running through that to just give it a bit more texture would have been kind of cool. Meanwhile, on his back, they have thoughtfully added those jetpack boosters that he has on his back in the comics, which is great. So this is really pleasing to see this little detail. So how does he fare in terms of articulation? Well, he does have the ball jointed head, and as you can see, thankfully, because they have designed it this way with the hood being separate, there isn't really much hindrance to him being able to move his head from side to side. He can look down at a pretty good distance. More of a struggle to get him to look up though, to be honest, but there's a little bit of wiggle room, which is quite nice. He does, of course, have the ball jointed shoulders, again, no problems there. He's got the bicep swivel as well, the double jointed elbows, and the pin swivel at the wrist as well. And in the main, he's able to bend his wrist right the way in and a little bit backwards, but not quite the same range of motion as going forwards, which is okay. He does have a sort of swivel at the waist, but it's more of a ball joint at the waist. However, as you can see with mine, when I try to spin him from side to side, it definitely wants to force itself back. It kind of feels like you got a lot of resistance there, and whatever you do, if you try and position one way, it slowly slides back to centre. He does have ball jointed hips, so of course he can kick his legs out to the side. The bottom of the tunic is a sort of hard plastic, but it is malleable, and there is a split up the side to allow him to kick his legs out and forwards and back. He's also got the upper thigh swivel as well, which is good, and of course he has the double jointed knees, as well as the ankle pivot, which is all pretty good. So it is a little bit hindered in terms of the leg movement because of the lower part of the tunic, but there's enough there to get him into lots of different dynamic poses that it doesn't actually cause too many problems. Now, Doctor Doom comes absolutely packed with accessories, including his Luger, some mystical sorcery effects, an extra pair of hands that open and grip, what I think is a radio transmitter, blast effects for his jetpack, and 2 occult textbooks. And I have to say, both of these books are really nicely done. They're a nice mould, but they're also quite nicely painted. So this bright red one, for example, has the logo. I believe this is of the Vishanti, is it? It actually looks like the medallion of power from Ghost Rider, but I'm probably just getting my laws mixed up. But you'll notice as well, on the interior, there's actually quite a nice bit of texturing going on here, some actual bits of writing, some graphs, and there's definitely an attempt to make these pages look weathered with the paint apps, and I just think they look really good. And the other cool thing about them is the fact that they've been moulded specifically with a thumb hold, so that when you put them in his hand, Doctor Doom can grip these books perfectly, so it looks like he's reading them, there's no danger of them slipping out of his grip, and they look really cool and really quite effective no matter how you pose them. And I think overall there's enough accessories here, enough different moving parts, if you will, that make this really an interesting figure, definitely really dynamic, really visually exciting, because there's so many different possibilities that you can use with them. So overall, I have to say this is a pretty fantastic Doctor Doom release. In fact, he might just be my favourite Marvel Legends Doctor Doom now. I really love the colour scheme they've gone for with the different tones. I love the cloth collar colour I think is a really fun, great idea. And of course he's absolutely loaded with some of the best accessories any Doctor Doom's ever come with. But despite all that good stuff, I'm probably still only going to give him a 4-star. So what really holds him back? Well, I just think, you know, if they just could have gone that extra mile in terms of the paint apps, just give him a wash over some of the armour. The mould is fantastic, so just, you know, go the extra mile and really make the most of it. It would have been absolutely amazing. You know, just have a little bit more detail, a little bit more detail just come out of that would have been fantastic. Also, the articulation, especially in the waist, is really frustrating. It doesn't quite work the way it should, and yeah, it limits you a little bit. So definitely lost a star for that. Overall though, this is a pretty fab set of figures. I think all of these figures are really fun and interesting, and I think they're really worthwhile special releases, special variants. I think they're really, really cool. As we can see when we put them together with the other standard releases, Thing and Mr. Fantastic, this makes a really fun lineup of the Fantastic Four, doesn't it? I mean, this looks really cool, seeing them with their various powers on display. It just visually just pops. And they all look really bright, colourful and fun. And for me, this definitely brings back memories from when I was a child and what I tend to think of as the Fantastic Four, really. Just being those larger-than-life, really colourful characters and just really fun. Lots of fun elements to them. And I think they've definitely captured that in these releases, where it's the various effects or accessories they come with, or just the paint apps, or whatever it is they've utilised each one. There's something about them definitely seems to be a cut above the standard figures in this wave. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.